Brief looks at what trademark colours are. So one of the first things you want to understand is what colours do for a brand. So there's some pretty solid research that shows that it really helps increase brand recognition by as much as 80%. So that gives you the stats on why colours are so important to brands, to companies. So getting the colour right is a big part of what your job as a graphic designer might involve. So choosing colours that work for advertising, for packaging. A lot of the time you'd be told if a brand already has established colours, if you're not working on the actual brand design, you get what's called a style guide, a brand style guide, and that tells you exactly what colours you should be using. And the style guides often give you the RGB values, so that's screen colours. They give you all the formulas for the colours that can be printed. And we're going to look, the second part of this lesson, we're going to look at the different colour models. Remember I said last time that colours get described by numbers? So we're going to get into that a little bit more, the difference between screen colour, how that's defined versus print colour. But there's a special sort of extra thing, which is what the second part of your assessment is talking about, which is some companies go a further step and trademark the actual colour. So when you're answering this, you might find it confusing that you'll see that the entire logo is trademarked. That doesn't mean that the same colour can't be used by another company though. So most of the time with the logo designs, companies don't do this extra level of protection to actually say that is our company colour. They don't do that, but the entire logo is protected, so you can't copy the logo, but you can still use that same colour. Okay, well now the difference with the trademarking, so here's the list. There's not a lot of them that are trademarked. It's an expensive process, and it does change. Like Cadbury's is one you're probably familiar with. They're purple. So Cadbury has been in and out of court trying to stop. The Swiss chocolate company started using a colour that was very similar. So that's what it gets down to. So what the idea is with trademarking a company, the company has to go through this whole process where they prove that that colour is an integral part of how customers identify it. It's so strongly associated with that product that someone else who has a similar product is not allowed to use it. So that's the difference. It has to be a similar product. So Cadbury can't take someone to court for using what they say is their purple for a dress. It's a different product. They're not in the same competing market. So there's no sense to that. So it doesn't mean you can't, as a graphic designer, use the exact same colour as long as it's not for the same product. So it's just a little bit of extra protection that these companies go to. If you think about that 80% increase in brand identity based on a colour, and you'll probably maybe be aware of, I don't know if anyone's heard of how Aldi has been in court quite a bit, because they do this thing where, or they were doing this, where they'll get a very major well-known brand and then they'll basically get a dupe, something that looks very similar and may have been produced somewhere else. But it looks so similar that as the consumer goes along the shelf, it's like, oh, there's that brand. But actually it's a very close similar. So they've been in court a number of times trying to defend some of those. So that it's really important to understand this because it does translate to money, but it also educates you a little bit about the importance of colour to companies, to brands, as part of their identity. And why brand designers, hey you guys who want well-paid jobs, get paid a lot of money, because working on a major brand, initiating it, or brand refresh, graphic design companies are, involved in that. Advertising company may be involved, and you might be a graphic designer sitting within that. Digital marketing agencies would be involved with branding. Creative agencies, full stop, would be looking at working with brands, and they'd be doing everything. They'd be doing social media ads, TV ads, running whole campaigns. And if you don't understand how to work with a brand and brand colours as a designer, you're not much use to anybody. So understanding how to work with brand colours, but also how to create a set of colours for a company. So it can be on that very small local level, like the local shop down the road here needed a new logo. One of our ex-students did it, and they've come up with a whole style guide for them. And it's, so it's a very achievable thing that you could be involved in. I walk around the shops here and I see quite a few of our ex-students have been busy out there. These are the ones that we know of. It does change, so these get challenged, like Cadbury's Purple's been challenged by competitors. The Barbie Pink has been quite controversial too. So you can find out a little bit about the background of this. Come on in. And you can see, even like the University of North Carolina, that's one I didn't know about. Carolina Blue, they've got their own blue. Tiffany is, it's an easy one to research. John Deere, they do tractors, I think. I don't know what Qualitex does. Green and gold. Oh, they've stolen the Australian colours. There you go. Caterpillar yellow, slip and side, I don't know that. Post-it note, that's one a product you're probably familiar with. They've bothered to trademark that yellow. Just remember when you're trying to answer this question not to get confused. Really follow this list or other research, and you're looking for, is it a trademark colour? The entire logo and branding, bits and pieces, even packaging can be trademarked. I don't know if you're familiar with Toblerone chocolates. They have a particular package, triangular, which is trademarked. And that's to stop another company that produces chocolates from using that same design. So parts of designs, not just colour, can be trademarked as well. Of course. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a time limit for? Do they need to renew these sort of trademarks, or once they have it, it's?
Once they have it, they have it until they're challenged.
Okay.
So it's worth it to companies to challenge it, But they will. What they tend to do, these companies, is they are on the lookout for copies. They're quite big companies. I think of Coca-Cola. If they spot someone else, their legal team is out there. Cadbury, same thing. They're very, on the lookout for copies, and they will take even very small companies. They will take them to court and fight tooth and nail to protect that. But they themselves have to go to court, go through a legal process where they prove that they have to present evidence that the identity of their product is so closely associated with that colour that they can be granted the trademark. Now, you can see there's not a huge amount on that list. That's because it's an expensive and difficult process. So, but you as a graphic designer, what you have to understand is the difference between just normal copyright of a logo or registering a design. So you can register a design. That means Toblerone could register and then extra trademark it. But the trademarking is, another level, costs money. There's a good list there to work from. All you have to do is choose two. There's a few other links in there to other ones, but it can be confusing. So Cadbury, you can read up on Cadbury. It's fascinating. It's been in and out of court. Not all the ones on this list are still trademarked, so you have to be careful about that. So I've had students give me stuff and it's just like, well, actually they haven't trademarked. I don't think Starbucks green, I don't think they've trademarked. The logo is protected, but not the colour. So just be aware, some of the information you get out there, they say, oh, these are all trademarked, but actually they're trademarked, but they haven't trademarked the colour necessarily. So the other list is better to work from. So those are ones that I'm familiar with that are definitely trademarked, but you know, it does, companies can give up on it too. They can lapse, you know, they can, you know, be challenged and then go, oh, okay, we're not going to keep on with this. But they're really, what they're trying to do is stop a direct competitor from using the same colour. Does that make sense? So in the brief, it just asks you a couple of questions. It asks you to, I'll just flip back to that now. So you've got 2 examples. Research 2 companies that have trademarked a colour for their own specific corporate identity and promotional purposes. And answer the question. So what's the name of the company? And then put a picture of that colour that they've trademarked applied to a product. Could be packaging. What is the trademark colour? If you can find what's called a Pantone number, then put that in. I'm going to show you some videos on Pantone colour system in a bit, so you understand what they're talking about there. So remember I talked about colours having numbers? Well, the Pantone colour matching system is one of the things that's used to define that colour exactly. So it always prints the same. So it's particularly used for print. And then provide a visual example of how the colour is used by the company. So make sure you put a URL for where you're getting the images from and where you're getting your information. So it asks for both, just like your other research. So what intellectual property and legislative requirements are relevant? So go in and have a look. There's some links on the Moodle to some sites that talk about the trademark law. So obviously, well, not obviously, I should explain that any logo that anybody produces, the original creator of it has the copyright ownership of it. So you've got copyright law, okay? But then you've also got this trademark law. It's very important. So we call it intellectual property, IP. So you're trying to find out things about intellectual property. So have a look at what's happened to that colour. So that company trying to register that colour, you should be able to find, because those use that list, the ones on that list, you should be able to find answers to the questions. Ask me if you're not sure. So when they say intellectual property, so that is, how do you protect, as a designer, how are you protecting your designs? If you create it, you automatically have copyright of it. But if you create it for a company, then they own the copyright for it. You can also transfer the copyright ownership via a contract. So that is why graphic designers, part of, in our diploma course, you would learn how to make a contract, because you actually transfer the ownership of the design from you to your client. So understanding intellectual property and the legalities around it is, you know, it's big money. If Cadbury decides to sue you and you're, you know, a small company producing, you know, handmade chocolates somewhere in the suburbs, and you know, ask a designer to design some packaging and they use a shade of purple that's awfully similar to Cadbury's, then you could find yourself in court. So it's actually the designer's responsibility to check and make sure you're not using a colour that is trademarked somewhere. So you're trying to protect your client. Your client's relying on you to have this knowledge so that they don't get sued for marketing a product that's in direct competition with an existing company that has a trademark colour. So it's just something to be aware about. So that might help you answer this question. Why do designers need to comply with these specific requirements? You're trying to protect your client's interests as well as your own, because you don't want to end up in court, right? So it's part of being a professional working with colour, and I think that's one of the reasons why you know, you can distinguish yourself once you're qualified from the sort of average person that's sitting on Canva creating designs. So it's part of the strength of having a qualification and having studied design formally, that you understand this. It's part of the value you bring as a graphic designer, that you understand and can protect a client from these accidental problems. So not creating a logo that looks too similar to someone else's, not using a colour that's actually been trademarked when it's a similar product. So generally speaking, it's considered, you know, under consumer law, it's that comes under that false advertising. Yeah? So you don't want to find yourself, you know, in fair trading court, being taken to court for, you know, deceptive advertising practices, because you've confused the consumer. So even if a colours are not trademarked, you still need to be aware to avoid, when you're designing for a client, to avoid using a colour that is too similar to a competitor's. And, you know, it's questionable if a company starts asking you to do something like that. You want to protect yourself as well. So, so the next thing, the next one is just your opinion. So if you look, say you're doing Cadbury, try and find out, is there a rationale that you can find out in the information you're researching about why they chose that colour? You know, was there something going on at the time the company was first formed, so that colour had an association? Is it an association with the actual product itself, you know, that suggests those colours? So I guess John Deere is out in the sun and the green, you know, like, are there reasons why the colour should be associated with that product? It makes sense. And then again, put an image of the colour, the branding. Okay, so that means the logo and any other, or maybe you could do packaging, but you might have done packaging earlier. So that's it really, and you have to do that twice. So it's the same stuff. You've got example 1 and example 2. It's exactly the same. So your answer, once you've figured it out for the intellectual property, will be very similar. That's fine. Try not to just cut and paste stuff off the websites, because, you know, I'm pretty familiar with them. But you should be able to look at on the Moodle, just, you know, have a look in week 2. And that's a bit of a summary of what I've been talking about. And then there's some other links there that are articles that you can go and have a look at to help you understand the legal issues around it. Okay, and there are different what's called jurisdictions. So Australia is one jurisdiction, the US market's another, Europe again. So sometimes you'll find a colour is protected in, you know, trademarked in one place, but it doesn't necessarily apply internationally. But that doesn't mean an American company can't sue you in Australia. So just being a little bit aware that maybe you research your company in Australia, you don't realise that it's actually a colour that's being used by a company overseas, and they have, say in America, Cadbury's, you know, it's under the American trademark law, but they'll still pursue in Australia because we have these trade agreements with each other. So it doesn't matter, you've still got to, as a designer, just protect yourself and protect your client. That's the bottom line. Yeah, and, you know, really consciously trying to copy another product to cause confusion, you can end up in court over that. You can end up in front of fair trading, for example. So lots of levels of government, and that's what you want to talk about in that legal implication. So there's some links there that should be useful to you. Some legal links you can go to and have a look that do a bit more explanation. So have a look there before you answer. I'll give you a little bit of time on that. Ask me if you've got any questions, but hopefully that covers it.